visualizing. So welcome to Picture Perfect Planet, observing the Earth from hundreds of satellites. This is a physics department public lecture jointly hosted by us and Wadham College. And so a warm welcome to the alumni of the physics department and those of Wadham College to this event today. I hope that you and your loved ones are safe and well in this most challenging of times. My name is Ian Shipsey. I'm a professor of physics here and also head of Oxford Physics. I'll say a few words about us and then give the floor to my remarkable colleague, Philip Spear, a leading climate scientist, who will introduce Will Marshall, today's speaker. So first, I want you to know that in Oxford Physics, we are all safe and well. The UK recently entered a second national lockdown. And from before the first one, we put in place safety measures against the virus that exceed university and government guidelines. As such, we were well prepared to enter this lockdown. Among the faculty and the staff, those that can work from home continue to do so, but about 20% of our colleagues conduct experiments in laboratories, and they are in the department every day as usual. You will also find, if you walked into the department, that our specialized research facilities, including our mechanical workshops, our electronics workshops, and a dozen other facilities of that type, are fully operational. 100 new PhD students arrived here in Oxford in October, and almost 200 new undergraduate physics students. All that we had admitted many months earlier are here. Lectures are given online. Most tutorials are in person. We continue to carry out our research online. We write, we publish papers. In fact, the rate of paper production has been quickening. We write grant proposals, they're awarded. We conduct seminars and colloquia and public lectures like this. We hold conferences, we hold access and outreach events. So despite the fact that our buildings are not as full as normal, most things are occurring as they always have done, except online. And that's important. As you know, at Oxford, we seek to bring the transformative power of physics to the foremost scientific problems of our time. From the smallest scales of particle physics to the largest scales of the universe as a whole, and everything in between, unraveling complexities to discover the way the universe is and how it works. Discoveries in physics, as you know, have formed the foundation of countless technological advances, and they play a very important role in many scientific areas. Many techniques used in fields as disparate as medical imaging and quantum computing are derived from physics instrumentation. And even the World Wide Web, invented by our former student and Oxford colleague, Tim Berners-Lee, grew out of information processing and communication requirements from particle physics. So we work with enterprise and with industry to bring our Oxford discoveries to society. We educate the next generation of physicists and engage with the public and with the government to educate them on the enabling power of science. The contributions of physics to solving global problems such as energy production, environmental protection, global warming, and public health are essential and have an enormous impact on our society and on our work. Now, as head of this great department, I have the privilege of working alongside colleagues whose research spans the entire breadth of our subject. They include particle physicists who played a leading role in the discovery of the Higgs boson, and just weeks ago, one of our students made a major breakthrough in the elucidation of its nature. Astrophysicists who are leaders in cosmology and galaxy evolution, the study of pulsars and transients, the search for exoplanets, and the development and construction of cutting-edge instrumentation for the most ambitious new astrophysics projects ever undertaken. In space instrumentation, we have developed instruments for 16 missions that orbit Earth and for missions to the Moon, to Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And just a couple of weeks ago, NASA's OSIRIS-REx made contact with asteroid Bennu, as you would have seen in the media, and we have been part of that mission since 2012. We lead the UK's national effort in quantum computing, holding world records for our ion trap qubits, for the experimental achievement of all elementary quantum logic operations with a precision of 99.9% or better, which are the best results achieved by any qubit platform. In biophysics, in the last couple of weeks, you may have seen news stories about the ultra-fast COVID-19 diagnostic tests that we have developed, working directly on throat swabs from COVID-19 patients without the need for genome extraction, purification, or amplification of the virus. The method starts with the rapid labeling of virus particles into sample with short fluorescent DNA strands. A microscope is then used to collect images of the sample, with each image containing hundreds of fluorescently labeled viruses. Machine learning software quickly and automatically identifies the virus present in the sample, and this approach exploits the fact that distinct virus types have differences in their fluorescent labeling due to differences in their surface chemistry, size, and shape. Our climate physicists are leaders in understanding, for example, the role of cloud and humankind's influence on cloud. Another aspect of climate change is the drive to achieve clean energy, and we hold world records for the efficiency of bauxite on silicon tandem cells, and our company, Oxford Photovoltaics, is close to having the manufacturing line in Germany up and running. The plan is to have the first modules available for market in late 2021. Another important approach to clean energy is nuclear fusion, turning hydrogen to helium mimicking the sun. And we lead international breakthroughs that have had recent breakthroughs in the understanding of plasmas at high temperatures. And what we have learned is how opaque they are. The fact that the opacity is relevant to energy transport in stellar interiors and of particular importance to inertial confinement fusion research. Machine learning is ubiquitous. We use it in multiple ways, for example, to visualize electronic quantum matter with scanning tunneling microscopes, or to teasing out the properties of elementary particles, to the discovery of new astrophysical objects. Our accelerator physicists lead international projects to build a next generation collider that would shed light on how the universe was born and develop accelerators for public health as well. And finally, you may have seen our esteemed colleague Roger Penrose has just been awarded the Nobel Prize for Physics for the discovery that black hole formation is a robust prediction of the theory of general relativity. Now, looking to the immediate future, we have ambitious plans to expand in climate science, in energy, and to harness the power of the second quantum revolution to improve the human condition. Just as quantum mechanics taught us how electrons move in metals and gave rise to the transistor, built in 1947, that ushered in our modern age and has enabled mobile cellular phones with 1 billion transistors like this one. So harnessing the properties of quantum mechanics, such as superposition, interference, and entanglement, Einstein's spooky action at a distance, will lead to quantum-enabled devices, the best known of which is quantum computing, but there is so much more, including perhaps a quantum-enabled phone. And if you ask me what it will do, I will not be able to tell you any more than the inventors of the transistor could have envisaged the existence of the cell phone and what it can do today. Now, if I had time, I could tell you so much more about the remarkable work we are doing in creating new scholarships supported by our alumni for students, about the research of the new inaugural professor of biophysics that's been made possible by our alumni and benefactors, about students and faculty creating startups at an accelerating rate, 5 new startups this year alone, a wonderful new course in enterprise and innovation, our access to Oxford's programs that works with high school students from families where nobody has ever been to university before, and outreach programs that have reached 200,000 members of the public in just the last 5 years. But time is short. We have some of our development team from both the UK and the US with me today. And if you'd like to know more about the things I've been talking about, then please do contact them. But now it's time for me to stop and introduce to you Philip Steer. Philip Steer is one of the world's leading climate scientists, and he has very good reasons today to introduce our speaker. So thank you very much, and over to Philip.
Great, thank you very much, Ian, and welcome to Will. So it's a real pleasure to introduce Dr. Will Marshall, the co-founder and CEO of Planet.com. should actually mention that this is partly an accident, because I looked into Planet because of mutual interests in machine learning and Earth observations and space instrumentation, that we have big ambitions and ideas in the department. And so when I went through the webpage, I by accident stumbled on the fact that Will actually is an Oxford physics alumnus. So this was a very nice accident, and we're really excited to have Will here today, at least virtually. Maybe we can follow up with a real visit sometime in the future. So Will did a master's in physics and space science and technology in Leicester, and then went on to do his DPhil here in the Department of Physics. And we mentioned already, he was also a student of Wadham College. He then went on to do postdoctoral fellowships at the George Washington University and Harvard, and then went to work as a scientist at NASA, among other projects on a lunar orbiter mission. And the interesting bit is, I think here in Oxford, you haven't worked much on the planetary side, but obviously you've quite strongly moved into that. He then went on to start a Planet with friends, and which has grown into now a major space company with operating a huge satellite constellation, and we'll hear all about that later. And building based on micro CubeSats that really picture the Earth from many different angles and many times a day. So in his talk today, Will share his entrepreneurial journey from Oxford to Planet, and together with examples of applications from university researchers using Planet data. And to be honest, I couldn't think of a more inspiring career inspiration talk for our earlier career researchers in the department, who sometimes believe there's only one career track once here in academia. And I think this just nicely shows what options are open to you when you have a degree here. So I'm very excited to hand over to Will now for his talk. Will.
Thanks very, very much, Philip and Ian. Thank you very much for the kind introductions. I'm going to try and share my screen here so you can hopefully see my talk. Oops, 1 second. Can you all see that okay?
Yes, it's loading. There it is. Perfect.
Excellent. Yes, thanks again for the introductions. It's really fantastic to be here. I was asked to speak a little bit about our satellite systems and in particular how they're related to environment and other research activities. And so we'll be getting to that. And my colleague, Joe Mosquera, will join us a little bit for some of that. He knows more about those applications than I do. I was also asked to speak just a little bit about my journey, and Philip there just read a part of it, but I dug up this old picture to kick us off, which was me in our lab there in the Clarendon laboratory. We were doing, I was in quantum optics and the atomic physics group, and we did this project which was looking at foundational issues in quantum mechanics. They're actually with Roger Penrose, who you just mentioned, who was one of my 2 supervisors, and Dirk Baumeister, who subsequently moved over to UC Santa Barbara, and Christoph Simon, all eminently smarter people than I, which is partly why I left academia, but partly because I had excitement about space, and excitement that I had been interested in long before I joined Oxford. I started being interested in astronomy when I was a young kid, and built a telescope when I was about 16, and then led me to Leicester that Philip mentioned. And after Oxford, I was always torn a little bit between theoretical physics and space geekery, as I call it. And the latter got the better of me and pulled me. And we ended up, after this postdocs, working on NASA on various planetary missions, like the one L-Cross, that crashed into the south pole of the moon looking for water, and we found large quantities of water on the lunar pole. And then the LADI mission, which is I think the mission you were referring to there, Philip, that was an orbiting mission looking at the tenuous atmosphere around the moon. Before I then got really interested in the Earth and the climate crisis and the environment crisis and the biodiversity crisis and what we can do about it as space geeks. And it seemed that there was a lot we could do about it, in particular in the realm of more regular Earth imagery. And we've been pioneering small satellite technology and lower cost satellite missions, because most sort of spacecraft missions cost about $1 billion, and we were thinking much more regular imagery would be really advantageous. So I've always been tinkering in optics, but very, very different journey from academia for sure after this time here pictured. So this is actually us in our garage just after we left NASA, typically of Silicon Valley. We started in the garage as the founding group of individuals that left NASA to start the company. And you can see a little telescope on the desk there. It was really the first design of our spacecraft. And that is the size and shape of our spacecraft. And I'll talk more about that shortly. Now we have over 500 people around the planet, mainly in San Francisco and in Berlin, our two major locations, but we have people remotely in quite a few countries, including a few in the UK. But this is the team in SF after we just delivered. The box in the middle contained about 26 satellites that got launched earlier this year. So we set ourselves the mission when we left NASA to image the whole Earth every day, actually the land mass and nearby coastal waters, not the high seas, at about 3.5 meter resolution. And to make that change that's visible from the changes between the daily snapshots of the Earth landmass, visible, accessible, and actionable to all those that needed it. And the motivation was really strongly related to the Sustainable Development Goals, the global challenges of our age, like alleviating poverty, which has a lot to do with refugees, and we could monitor those, and hunger, which has a lot to do with agriculture, and we could help with agricultural efficiency. And of course, all the sustainability ones, where tracking deforestation, tracking the ice caps, and so on. We'll talk about some of those applications shortly. But we figured out that we could, Earth imaging in particular, more rapid imagery of the Earth could help the action, the monitoring, verification, and reporting, to be more precise, of the Sustainable Development Goals, 14 of the 17. And that's really important. The UN Environment Programme reported last year that of the environment-related sub-indicators of these goals, there's hundreds of sub-indicators, of the ones all related to environment, which is just about half, almost half, is they assessed how we're doing 5 years into these Sustainable Development Goals, a 15-year process up to 2030. 5 years in, they determined that 8% were behind, 23% were ahead and of the target or on target, but a whopping over 60% of them were actually not tracked at all, so we didn't know. And so the real fact is we have a data gap, or at least the UN has a data gap, and nation states implementing the SDGs have a data gap, and that's a lot to do with more rapid imagery. And in fact, the Deputy Secretary General of the UN recognized this in a letter to us, basically saying this data is really crucial to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So a little bit about Planet's journey to get to this daily imaging mission. First, we had to shrink our satellites. So this is the Landsat satellite, a workhorse of the last 40 years. The Landsat series have done an incredible job of understanding our planet. But we wanted to do it on a daily basis and at higher resolution. And the first thing was that we would realize that we needed over 100 satellites. And for that, we wanted to shrink them in order to have to do it in a reasonable cost, because the Landsat satellite costs of order $1 billion, like most satellites. And so we shrunk the technology about 1,000-fold, so about 1,000x in mass. And we launched a lot. We've launched hundreds of satellites. This is our current fleet. We've just got just over 150 satellites. We've got the 130 that do the line scanning mission that collect, I think it's close to 300 million square kilometers a day. And the Earth's landmass is about 150 million square kilometers, so almost twice the landmass of the Earth. And they have 8 spectral bands, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then we have the 21 high resolution satellites, including 6 that were launched this summer on 2 SpaceX rockets that enable us to get up to 7 revisits of any particular place on the Earth's landmass every day, and up to 12 in some locations, like in Oxford. Actually, we could do up to 12 because the latitude is sort of highly aligned. And these are actually half a meter resolution now, because we lowered all of these satellites. A slight update from this deck. And this is what one of those satellites, the Dove satellites, looks like. I mean, I won't go into detail too much, but I mean, it's quite a sophisticated spacecraft. CubeSats were once toys, or considered toys, of universities to do training and things like this, and to what spacecraft contain, as opposed to develop really highly capable pieces of scientific quality data. But these are very much high quality instruments. Unlike the Landsat satellite, where payloads are a small fraction of the mass, the payload, being the telescope and the camera system, is really the dominant mass, about 90% of the mass of our spacecraft. So it's really mainly a telescope and camera looking down, and all the other equipment of the satellite is squeezed into a tiny box at the back. To give you a sense of the capabilities, it carries a 49 megapixel camera, several terabytes of storage, so that it can take a lot of many days of pictures without having to download, although we download every few hours, but just a backup. Also, some of the most powerful computers in orbit, probably the most powerful computers in orbit, because we constantly update our technology. We have radio systems, and actually, I am absolutely frequently was still astonished at the data rates that we get back, which is from our tiny little spring antenna. It just looks like a little paperclip or a little spring on the front of our spacecraft, a few centimeters long, and we get more than a gigabit a second down over 1,000 kilometer range to our antenna. We have ground-based antenna, about 50 of them all around the Earth, that collect that data. They're mainly about 4-meter parabolic dish, SNX band. So we get just over a gigabit a second to pull down all the tremendous amount of data. These are just always on scanning satellites. And we have our own spectral bands, our own telescope designs that have to survive the launch environment, the space environment, and so on, and all doing that under a very low cost budget that we maintain. This is a video just for fun of some of a couple of launches. I've got a video. Let's see if this plays. Does look like it's looking to play, but let's see. Oh. Okay, it skipped through that. Imagine really powerful rockets going up and satellites coming out the back. We can go straight to this, which is how the system works. It's obviously sped up, but 130 satellites are in a sun-synchronous orbit, and that ended up being basically like a line scanner for the planet. And then we also have 15 of the 21 SkySats in a similar orbit. So the line scanner literally scans every point of the landmass of the Earth once per day. And then these are just coming in now, the SkySats that we recently launched on the 2 SpaceX rockets, that enable us to get to this, around 7 or up to 12 revisits per day at this 50-centimeter resolution. So you have basically 2 systems of satellites. It is the largest Earth imaging fleet ever launched by quite some degree, and it produces really quite a lot of data, which is really, I could talk and wax lyrical about all the satellite technology, but the data is where it's at. And here's a few top line stats. We get about 3 million images per day. We have about 1,300 images of every point in the landmass on average around the Earth. So that's a deep stack of imagery documenting immense change, actually slightly more images of every location than the Landsat satellite series did over the last 40 years, and at much higher resolution. Now, the Landsat and Sentinel now systems are extremely complementary to the Planet systems, and I'll explain some of that in a bit. But anyway, we produce a lot of data. And this is the result. So it's imagery at 3.7 meter resolution, and I can show you some of the higher resolution images as well. But you can see buildings, roads. You can't see individual people. You can see the fields. You can see the forests. You can see the rivers, and so on. The important thing is we scan the whole world like that every day. And then not just in optical. Here's a couple of it's a full scarlet image using a couple of our other spectral bands. We have these 8 spectral bands, and I'll show you them. These are these. So now if you look at the third row down, that's what the current system is, and we're trying to evolve it to be as close as possible to the Sentinel-2 system. And as you can see, over time, the satellites have evolved to be pretty close to the spectral bands of the Sentinel-2 system. The applications for this are quite wide-ranging, so we serve lots of different companies around the world. This case shown here is in agriculture. So our near-infrared spectral band is used to create what's called an NDVI, normalized difference vegetation index, which basically is a measure of how much biomass is in because chlorophyll sticks out like a sore thumb in the infrared, and basically we're enabled to tell crop yield and crop type and things like this in each 3 by 3 meter area of each farmer's field around the whole earth. And that can be used every day to help the farmers decide when to add fertilizer, where there's blight, when to harvest, and so on and so forth. It's called precision agriculture, and increases yields by 20 to 40% in the developed world, and even more in the developing world, although they're the rate limiting factors getting the data to them. We work with large ag companies that help that. Of course, efficiency in ag is extremely important to the global challenges of our day, because it takes up over 25% of the land mass of the earth, and is the major pressure point. That land use change is the major pressure point on deforestation and other things. So increasing efficiency is important for feeding the planet and for stopping biodiversity loss. We work with governments on a whole range of things, from border security and understanding things around the planet. This is a use case just shown here of a missile test that was shown in Iran. And it was a failed missile test, and we were the first to pick that up. And governments, of course, interested in that, also helping them understand how to respond to disasters like floods, fires, earthquakes, and so on. And so we work a lot with various elements of government. We have a big working relationship with the European Space Agency, with NASA for tracking key climate variables and things like that, and also in security realm as well. And then startups, we work with various companies that build analytical capabilities on top of our data to service different markets, especially where it needs bespoke algorithms or other data sets combined with ours to service them. We work with civil society, so NGOs around the planet that use our data. I'll show a few more examples of that shortly, but so in this case, it was looking at the villages burned in Rohingya. And it's also part of shedding light on the world, which I'll talk about with a media piece. But we work with a lot of NGOs, from Human Rights Watch to Greenpeace, tracking everything from refugees to deforestation. We work with folks in academia, and of course that's a lot of the topic for today. And in academia, a wide variety of things. And research papers, and we'll talk more about that. In media, it's shedding light on the world event, and I call it fighting this post-truth nonsense, an era that we find ourselves in, and pictures speak 1,000 words. I want to talk about a few of our projects to give you a sense of the scale of the efforts, 3 in particular. This first one here was a project we undertook last year and still this year, mapping all the world's coral reefs. And I was shocked, but never been done, or at least not globally comprehensively, and classifying them. Most coral reefs are below 15 meters, under 15 meters in depth. And we can tell with our spectral bands certain classification of the different types. And in addition to doing the first mapping, it's regularly revisiting these to see if there's signs of ocean bleaching or illegal fishing and shipping activities around these coral reef areas, which of course is super important for biodiversity. We of course have challenges to do with deforestation, and we take regular images of all the forests and just about see every tree canopy and see the deforestation emerge. And it's really just shocking to see that as it happens. So we did a partnership that we announced just a few weeks ago to basically track deforestation across the entire tropics, 64 countries, funded by the Norwegian government, and working with the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, as well as the forestry ministries in these 64 countries, to track literally every tree in their forested areas to help prevent deforestation. It's a massive new project. So this kind of global scale projects we're undertaking. And another one related for us is forest fires, and we've, especially in our home state of California, been troubled by those, of course, hugely in the last year. Huge areas of land, 4 million hectares, have been burnt in California this last year. We worked with Salo AI to produce what we call the California Forest Observatory, which was the first detailed mapping of all the trees in California. And this is important for firefighters for two reasons. Basically, we show the real-time extent of fires, where the lines of the fires, where's the smoke blowing, and so on, to help the firefighters in real time. And then secondly, it's knowing where the fodder is for future fires, where's the vegetation overgrown, where the fire lanes need clearing, and so on, so that the firefighters outside the fire season could be helping to prevent the future mega fires. So this is a system we hope to roll out to other parts of the world, like Australia and others as well. Here's a couple of examples in media. I want to highlight this top one to do with concentration camps, or detention camps, I should say, in China, where ingenious reporters had looked at our data, found in Bing Maps a bunch of areas that were blanked out, and figured that was because of Chinese government restrictions. And then they looked at those very same areas in our imagery, and indeed found a bunch of detention camps, or suspected detention camps, and most of which hadn't been previously disclosed. Over 100, I think it was about 170 detention camps that haven't been exposed. And that sort of thing, shedding light on the world's events, is an important thing that we stand for. So I'm going to tee up a little bit about this and then hand it over to my colleague, Joe Mosquera, who runs our education and research program, to talk a little bit about some of the use cases, but they cover a gamut of areas. Research and helping to supply data for research is less the core of our mission than helping real-time action like that deforestation and stopping and preventing illegal fishing and the agricultural productivity. It's more, let's say, applied than academic, but we really are keen in there, of course, almost always interrelated. The agricultural work relies on deeper research in academic research on agriculture using our data. The stuff in climate relies on the deeper research that is done. And so we are extremely proud to be fostering that as much as we can. And with that, Joe, are you on?
I am. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Do you want me to swap the slides to you, or shall I just do them for you?
You can swap them to me, Will. It might be easier.
Yeah, here you go.
Thanks. Just give me a moment.
You're also Dr. Will Marshall, it says on the slide.
I saw that. Yeah, I'm quite grateful. And Will, thanks for the brief introduction. I also wanted to say Oxford has been my host a couple of times. Ben Caldecott, my colleague at the Smith School, has welcomed me a few times to campus, and I'm grateful to be able to speak with you briefly again today. So, as Will said, Planet has a wide number of partnerships in the scientific and university communities. He mentioned the NASA relationship that we have in the US, as well as our relationships with the European Space Agency. What I'm going to talk about primarily is our education and research program, which is tailored to universities. So we have about 5,000 users at more than 1,000 schools throughout the world using Planet data under their university affiliation. We make a limited amount of data available at no cost by application. And we actually have about 40 users at Oxford. If you folks are interested in getting Planet data with your Oxford affiliation, you can go to go.planet.com/research to apply, and just give us about a week to process those applications. As a global land imaging mission, and a daily one, the first daily land imaging mission, the Dove constellation has powered an enormous amount of scientific research at a wide diversity of institutions. I wanted to also highlight that in addition to those basic user accounts, we also provide site licenses, which are at low cost, to about 50 schools worldwide. We've recently added the University of Copenhagen and Technical University of Munich in Europe to our campus site license program. This is very similar to the way Esri provides site license access at universities. And let me highlight a few recent results in your neck of the woods. So with the pandemic, we've actually been inundated with requests to use data to understand some of the changes in the Earth system. And this is recent work out of the University of Trento in Italy, looking at sediment loads in the waters around Venice, which experienced basically a great reduction in pollution with the stopping of global maritime traffic for, well, early in the pandemic. Also at the University of Cyprus, use of our data to look into archaeology. This was quite a cool, and I know there's a number of studies, including studies using LiDAR to do this type of work. I've seen some of this type of work in the UK, but the changes in soil moisture and vegetation phenology, which are uniquely visible with the daily dove observations, allow archaeologists to study ancient cities, and in this example, in Romania, actually. And another recent one, and I know it's a big passion of Will's, this sort of infusion of marine plastics that we've been dealing with this century. This is another one where the timeliness of the dove imagery uniquely enables you to capture storm events which carry marine plastics out into the open sea. And so this is work out of the National Technical University of Athens, recently published this year in Remote Sensing. And those are just a flavor, but really, as a global imaging mission, the scientific community has been able to leverage the planet data in almost every element of the Earth system, including and most especially in remote sensing itself. And I did want to highlight, there are a number of studies now that have fused dove imagery with other sensors, especially the Sentinel system out of the European Union. And we think that these studies have certainly taught us how to improve our own product line. And I'm very excited that over the next several months and early next year, Planet, I think, will be releasing some products that have allowed us to kind of fine-tune our radiometry related to these other public sensors. They've also, on the bottom of this slide, given scientists access to the unique daily changes visible in ecosystems and other land surface features. One I want to highlight in the bottom right, because it's close to my heart, is in tropical ecology, where the dove imagery constellation has allowed us to look at the phenology, the actual tree level canopy changes of individual tropical trees. And this leads us down a path where I think the scientific community could begin to do species level detections with this data in certain situations, and also understand some of the unique ecological effects of climate change, where these systems are so sensitive to changing climate conditions. But in other elements of the Earth system, in the geosphere, we've had a number of studies looking at surface deformation. So they use our imagery to look at earthquakes after the fact, and also understand deformations that occur in the cryosphere with glacier retreat and other cryospheric phenomena. In the hydrosphere, I mentioned the plastics, but down in the bottom right, the dove constellation imagery is so frequent that in many instances we can see even sub-daily changes in rivers. So as you get higher and higher in latitude, the dove's tracks are crossing so frequently that they're separated by only about 60 or 90 seconds. And certain hydrosphere scientists have been able to leverage this to understand stream flow itself. A number of atmospheric studies, we've had a few folks look at air pollution, even in our visible data, and they're leveraging neural networks to do this. This is work out of Duke University. Also, some groups have been using machine learning to improve cloud masking and other types of atmospheric detections that can improve the way you can clean and prepare images for data analysis. I mentioned the cryosphere already, but not just glaciers and rivers, but permafrost. The dynamics of our changing permafrost ecosystems in high latitudes are also uniquely explored by the high frequency of the dove constellation. And finally, and perhaps most widely, we've been able to, through the scientific partnerships with the Education and Research Program, also the NASA relationship and the ESA relationship, I think understand more about the physical structure of ecosystems. In the center of this page is an article from a group that's done an enormous amount of work on forest structure in tropical forests, particularly in Peru, but other forests. And here they're fusing LiDAR, so active sensor data from aircraft, with Planet's optical data. Planet can resolve, as Will said, the individual crowns of tropical trees. And so this is a very carbon centric or sort of carbon relevant metric. And by putting these two together, we're able to do stocks and fluxes of carbon from tropical forests essentially at a daily cadence, which is a really impressive breakthrough enabled by the DOVE system. So again, I just want to remind folks to please, if you do not have a Planet account with your Oxford affiliation, don't hesitate to apply for one, and we should be able to process those pretty quickly. And Will, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me see if I can share my screen again. And yeah, I wanted to touch a little bit on where we're going in the future before handing it over to questions and answers. And I've been trying to type a few questions and answers whilst Joe was speaking here. Oh, I need to go through this bit. Yeah, peeking into the future. I want to talk about where remote sensing is going a little bit first. So firstly on the satellite side, what we're seeing is the evolution first jumped from the really big monolithic observatories to small constellations like the Rapid Eye constellation. And then we went to our sort of system of large fleets of scanning small satellites that integrated, provide, an integrated capability. Now I think we're moving towards a sort of remote sensing 4.0, which is where diverse arrays of satellites provide towards virtual constellational capabilities, which leverage the best of all the kinds of data to in synergistic ways. And I think and I wanted to show you one example of that. This is a product we just released called Planet Fusion, which takes all of our PlanetScope imageries with all the limitations of clouds, which somebody was asking about in the chat, coverage, various other challenges, integrates it alongside Sentinel data, Landsat data, MODIS data, and others, and interpolates some of the time using really deeply researched and validated techniques to get a cloud-free, daily, and radiometrically accurate fused data product, which makes it much easier and is actually, frankly, really quite spectacularly accurate. And this, I think, oh no, that's not. This one hopefully will show. This is the NDVI, that normalized difference of vegetative index that I mentioned earlier, and this fused product is incredibly accurate to the ground truth data of the vegetative index here. And that's one of the benefits. But basically what you're enabling is the benefit of the radiometric accuracy of the Landsat and the Sentinel type systems alongside the frequency and resolution advantages of our system. So our systems are less radiometrically accurate, they're less well calibrated, and so on, that we work hard to get them better and better, but they're less well calibrated compared with Landsat and Sentinel. But on the other hand, they are much more frequent and much higher resolution, which, for example, in agriculture means that you can get the smallholder farms, and the daily revisit is important for growing the crop growing season. Ditto with deforestation tracking, where you want to see the individual tree. If 40% of deforestation happens at the degradation level, which is sort of individual tree level, you can't see that in the Sentinel and Landsat data because the tree is too small, but you can in ours. And the daily frequency is important. So it gives you the best of both worlds, and we're increasingly enabling that. The other part of the thrust, so that we're moving to these virtual constellations, the other part of the thrust is to do with artificial intelligence and machine learning. And here, just like most areas of the world, disciplines and industries are being hit from the side with artificial intelligence. It's affecting everything, and it's no different for us. And of course, we've got a huge data set, and so it's particularly right area. And computer vision techniques to do with image processing have been particularly great and advancing. And so we sort of set our next level goal was indexing what's on the Earth and making it searchable, a bit like Google indexed what's on the internet, created a database. We're doing the same. So imagine if we get every image and we say there's a plane, there's a tree, there's a ship, there's a truck, there's a road, this is a what have you, we can turn that into a database of what's on the planet. Here's an example of that. These are the roads in red and blue, buildings in blue in San Francisco and California, and indeed, as this increasingly showed, the entire globe. And we think it was the first time that anyone had ever mapped all the roads and buildings of the whole Earth. And of course, in most developed world, there's not most of it's known, although sometimes we find pieces that aren't, like we did recently in Germany. But in many countries, there's huge areas that are unmapped in terms of that. And really, this is, feeds into a broader piece, which is there's two massive global economic shifts. One was digital transformation of industries, and one is the sustainable transformation. And as we look to come out of COVID and the COVID-induced economic recession, we need to reboot the economy into a sustainable one. And the first thing that is necessary to go into a sustainable economy, whether you're a bank doing green bonds, or a company measuring your ESG targets, or economy measuring your climate targets, the first thing you need is data and measurements to underpin those. And our data set is sort of primed to help with that transition. And I just wanted to end by saying, well, that's super important, because we really are in an environmental crisis. And it's my passion, like Joe's, especially to do with biodiversity. This one's just a climate one, though. This was the Milne ice sheet on the 26th of July, and then 31st of July, the last major ice sheet that being lost and into this ocean. But much more shocking than that to me is not so much the climate stuff as the biodiversity loss, where climate is one driver, but it's actually not even the main one. The main one is land use change that I was mentioning before. It's deforestation for land, for people to grow crops and graze animals, and that pressure is just destroying our ecosystems. And we've already lost 68% of all the species in aggregate, or of the wildlife in aggregate, 82% of the wild mammals on Earth. This is in my lifetime. It's just shocking. And 75% of the fish and other animals in freshwater systems, over half the world's corals. And this is an emergency, and it's less the climate than the biosphere. And this, to me, is the crisis of our age. And one tiny bit of silver lining potentially from COVID, and it's such a tragedy, of course, in aggregate, but one tiny bit of silver lining I see is that we've shown ourselves our ability to make big changes as a society, to massively switch behavior to virtual meetings and working from home and flying less and all the other things. And so we've shown that we can do that, and we need to do that for this ecosystem emergency. And had all that loss of life happened in 4 months instead of 40 years, perhaps we'd be dealing with it more like the emergency that it really is. And we really hope that our data can help reverse and stop that trend. So I'll just leave it with a question over to you all, which is, what would you do if you could see daily change of the planet? My passion is helping to curb that biodiversity loss. There's many other things that can be done with the data, and we want it to be in the hands of those that need it to do the research and do their activities, whatever they are, to make smarter decisions to help us to take care of the Earth. And so with that, I'll say thank you very, very much, and open it out to questions and answers.
Fantastic, Will. Thank you very much for a really interesting talk. There's already quite a few questions in the Q&As. If you want to just go ahead and pick some, or I can also select them for you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to open them somehow. I can't open them. Maybe why don't you start reading? Maybe I do that, and then maybe I can see the Q&A. Ah, yeah, now I can see them. Perfect. Okay, right. It says, how far does cloud coverage affect you? I already mentioned a little bit, about 40% globally average, there is cloud. In some areas like the tropics, it's much more. And so you do often get extended periods of time, like Pascal here is asking. But the good thing is, when there's a cloud-free day or even morning, we will capture an image, and so it has in some cases enabled first images that in areas where there were in many decades of Landsat imagery never a cloud-free shot, and we managed to get through and get some. So it certainly helps, although it's not. I call it burning through the clouds. It's not perfect, but it's ideally you would get through there, and ultimately there's SAR systems and other things that can help with that. What do you think will be the next big thing in Earth observation? Do you foresee a convergence or divergence between techniques used by planet labs and those public research and space agencies? Well, I mentioned the next big things, really these virtual constellations, as well as machine learning, and how that enables us to digest and process all this imagery that once took somebody with a background and PhD in satellite image processing, and now, you know, interns in machine learning come in and can do smarter tree detection than it would take years and years to develop. So it's getting easier, and it's easier to do at scale. So that's incredible. But in terms of the convergence, I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think that there's a place for these very highly sophisticated and radiometrically accurate and other accurate measurements, public instruments that cost a lot more. And there's a place for these instruments like ours. And so I think they'll continue side by side. I personally am hugely enamored by the Sentinel program, for example, and I think that should continue, and we want it to continue, and I think ours helps add something in addition. Ian says this is a quantum leap in our ability as humans to see where we live from above. Do you know anything about what the impact this is having, e.g. psychologically, individually, and as communities? I think that's a really fascinating point. One of the inspirations for Planet was that Earthrise picture that the Apollo 17 astronauts took, which apparently was not a trivial factor in seeding the green movement, in the sense of, although we all knew we were on a planet, this was the first time we really saw it, and saw that it was in the fragile vastness of space. And I do think that that was a wake-up time and a psychological evolution for us to, as a society, suddenly wake up that we're on a fragile planet. So that brought us awareness. And what I would say our data is doing is it is a bit like a big mirror in space, and it's much more about action now. So we're moving from an awareness to action, and action because we can see it daily. So we see ourselves in the mirror every day, and we see what we're doing to ourselves or to our planet. And so in that sense, I think it's psychologically driving us, not just now we're aware on a fragile planet, to hopefully motivating us to do something about it. Do you also contribute to humanitarian emergency mapping initiatives such as HOSM, like Maxar, for example? I don't know what HOSM is, but we do contribute a lot of work to humanitarian causes, a lot of NGOs, and in disaster relief, we I think are the only commercial company that provides our data under the International Disaster Charter, which provides Earth imaging in emergency under emergency circumstances like floods and fires and earthquakes and so on, freely available in those times. What is the envisioned lifespan of a satellite? Well, the smaller ones, the Dove satellites, last about 3 years. The larger ones, the SkySats, last about 6 years, and then they re-enter into the top of the Earth's atmosphere. To what extent is the planet data free to use for research? Is there a limit, for instance, on the number of tiles or the extent? So there are a few different programs. Joe mentioned our education research program. It is a paid program. Research universities that by department or site-wide licenses for campuses do have to pay, although it's a pretty low amount. It's actually extremely low. It really is mainly just to cover the cost of our egress and other things. And there is some certain limits, I believe. Joe, maybe you can speak to that. Are there limits on the amount of tiles and the extent? Can you describe that, if you're still on?
Yeah, so the site licenses, the campus-wide license includes about 200 million square kilometers of data on an annual basis. And that's up to 2,000 users on campus. So it generally can support an entire institution. And as Will said, they're priced very competitively with, I put it in the same order of magnitude as an Esri site license. But as a reminder, as an individual user with an Oxford affiliation, you can apply for limited free access. It's an application process. We review the application, so we need to know what you're going to be doing with the data, and we'll review the content of those applications. But that is a way to get Planet data at no cost for scientific publication purposes with an Oxford affiliation.
Can you say how much, sorry, was there a follow-up to that?
No, it's just me, Philip. I see there's a huge amount of questions still, which is fantastic. I just want to give you the freedom also to cut the answers short if you want to wrap up.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I would try and cover as quickly as many as I can. Is there a Rosenberg classification data layer publicly available? No. It's not. How much of the country is covered by roads and parks, in car parks? I actually don't know. I'd be very interested to do that. We should have the data to be able to answer that question, but I don't know if we've ever done that aggregate. Impressive data and cadence. Can you say more about your business model? Basically, we sell our imagery. We sell our imagery to those big agricultural companies. We sell our imagery to NASA, the European Space Agency, or others. We do have subsidized agreements for the education and research and NGOs. I mean, it's basically at cost. And so really we make our money as a commercial company from the big agriculture and commercial and government organizations that can and should pay for it. That's basically the business model. And our prerogative is to get the data out to as many users as we possibly can. But of course we have to pay for the millions of dollars we've spent on launches and rockets. It's not in the billions, but like the government missions, but it's certainly still expensive to buy. We've had 30 rockets take off the planet, and that doesn't come cheap. How can the physics department best support students to explore entrepreneurship? Oh, that's a great question. It's not a short answer, but I believe that doing internships at startups could be an interesting thing to do. Just in promoting industrial connections is a good thing. I mean, look, I mean, I think that, but still the most important thing is the education piece of it. And I believe my physics background is incredibly important. I mean, I use it every day. I have my calculator by my desk. I'm increasingly in management meetings because we have 500 people, and that's so I go down to the lab, and they'll slap me on the wrist before I touch anything, just like I remember doing to my supervisor when he came in the lab at Clarendon, because it's like you were worried that they would do more damage than help. And so I feel I'm now that person when I go into the lab, so I don't often actually get to tweak things. But I mean, fundamentally the physics background was super important and still comes up every day when I think about new constellations and so on. I'll just try and tackle a couple more. What plans do you have to counteract the problem caused by large-scale satellite systems such as yours? Oh, deep sky observations. Yeah. Well, ours are very small, and we haven't heard any complaints of that. The sky, a Starlink system of SpaceX has been causing a lot of challenges for astronomers. I believe they're trying to paint their satellites black. I was trying to bring this up to the SpaceX higher ups. Do you detect cloudy images in orbit and delete the data to save the downlink? No, we bring it all down. We bring everything down. Are there any restrictions on what you're allowed to image? No, not really. Our imagery is not considered a resolution that's really causes military significance. We are licensed and have to do licenses through the government, the US government, and we ensure that we adhere to all these restrictions of the EU and US governments in terms of not providing data to certain actors and so on. And we have an ethics committee that restricts it in further than that, where we worry about the application, but generally we are allowed to provide it to almost anyone. Are you planning hyperspectral systems? Let's talk about that in a year. Do you think about satellite models that will change in the future? How do you think satellite models? Well, I think they'll get smaller and more capable, but also so we have two big trends going on in the space industry at the same time. One is lowering cost of launch. Everyone's aware of these rockets getting cheaper, like SpaceX, and that has finally, and actually it only made a difference starting last year. Most people think it got cheaper as soon as SpaceX existed, but it didn't. Having bought rockets for the last 20 years, they've stayed flat actually for more than that, about 40 years until last year. And then indeed they reduced cost about 4x. But I would say the much more dramatic change is happening on the satellite side, where we're seeing changes of 1,000x in terms of capabilities per kilogram you can put into the fairing. And that is because of the miniaturization of technology like the smartphones that Ian was holding up, and your laptops, and that miniaturization of sensors and hard drives and processors we're leveraging. We call it strapping our satellites to Moore's law. That is, we're constantly trying to iterate them faster and faster. We've had 13 iterations of our Dove satellites. And so I think we'll see that trend continue, and that will have bigger changes to what is produced than actually the rocket changes. And the satellites will continue to get smaller, more capable per kilogram. Right, I'm going to wrap it there. Philip, were there any other questions you wanted to ask, or should we have any live questions, or what did you want to do from here?
No, I think that's fantastic. Thank you very much for your time and a really fascinating talk. One of your answers gave me big reassurance, because as a cloud physicist, I got slightly worried about chucking through the clouds in between. I'm glad you downlink all data, because I think the high resolution data on clouds could be tremendously useful for the climate community. So thanks again for your time and a fascinating talk. This was really great. There's still 130 people listening, so that's actually, they haven't dropped off, so there's really excitement. And I think this provided a real inspiration for many of us. So thank you very much for your time, and we hope to be in touch.
Hey, thanks a lot. Nice to see everyone. Bye-bye.
Great, thank you.